Welcome to the Commodore 64 compilation comparison video. It's been a while since I've done one of these because of holidays and things like that. It does take a while to put these together, so apologies for that, but I'm hoping to do these more often going forward. Today I'm going to be looking at the Tengen Trilogy. This is a compilation of 3 Atari coin-op games converted to the Commodore 64. It was published by Domark Software in 1991 and it's got a retail price of £19.99, which seems like quite a lot, although I think most people probably got it for less than that for reasons I'll go into in due course. So let's take a look at the packaging for this compilation and then we'll take a look at the games. Firstly, let's briefly talk about why this is called the Tengen Trilogy rather than the Atari Trilogy or something like that. Basically, it's because Atari's home division and Atari's arcade division were 2 separate companies by this point, and for some reason when it came to publishing Atari's coin-op conversions on home systems, they couldn't be published under the name Atari, so they came up with this new company called Tengen, and that's why it's called Tengen Trilogy. Basically, all Atari coin-ops after a certain point, the home conversions are released by Tengen rather than Atari. I don't know why that is. Go and look it up on Wikipedia if you want more information on that. So anyway, let's take a look at the packaging. As you can see, quite a big packaging and unusual as well. It's a kind of plastic massive tape case, but obviously it's got multiple tapes and things in it. So yeah, in terms of the front, you've got the picture of the 3 different games that are included, which are Cyberball, Klax and Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters. You can see a picture of the Klax arcade machine in the middle, Cyberball robot, and then just some monsters and things on the right hand side there. Now, one thing I mentioned in the intro was about the fact that perhaps not many people paid £19.99 for this compilation, which was the RRP. And the reason I say that is that almost all the copies I've seen of this on eBay have this on the front, which is the Home Computer Club Special Edition, and I'll get into what the Home Computer Club was in more detail shortly, but I think for that reason that people probably didn't pay the full price for this, because most people seem to have got it from the Home Computer Club rather than buying it directly from a shop. So anyway, we've also got some information at the bottom there, the Domark logo and the Tengen logo. So let's move and have a look at the spine. As you can see, it's just yellow with the Tengen Trilogy written on it. And over to the back now, again, you've got the Tengen Trilogy written at the top and the overview of the 3 games. I'm not going to go into this into too much detail, but as you can see, it's got details about Klax, Cyberball and Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters, which suggests there you can escape from the world of boring video games. So I'm not sure what it's saying about the other 2 games on the compilation. It's got some screenshots there. I think they're from the Amiga versions or maybe the Atari ST, certainly not the Commodore 64 versions. Logos for the 3 games as well, and a bit of copyright information at the bottom there too. Just if we're zooming a little bit on this Klax entry here, you can see it says copyright 1999 Tengen Incorporated, but it does then mention Atari Games Corporation, which was the arcade division of Atari at that point in time. So let's take a look inside the box, and as you can see, it's quite flimsy. This is broken apart. The plastic's not very high quality, so you do find these are broken quite often. And also inside you've got all the kind of paper making up the cover of it and everything. That's all kind of a bit dog-eared and stuff because of the way this is designed. It's not a very good design. I don't think there's many other compilations or any kind of software that was released for the Commodore 64 in this kind of plastic packaging. It's also got some advertising for other Domark games there. You can see there hard driving, Castle Master, Tubing, Pictionary and a couple of others there. And at the bottom there it says, if you enjoyed the Tengen Trilogy and would like your computer to show you what else it can do, look out for these fantastic games from Domark. Remember, your computer is the best, so only feed it the best software. When asked, 9 out of 10 computers prefer Domark software. Okay, interesting sort of self-promotion there from the company. So let's now move on and take a look at the cassettes and also the instructions for this compilation. So as you can see, the 3 games come on 3 separate cassettes and they're in a plastic bag along with the instruction manuals. So let's just take a look at the tapes. So firstly, there's Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters, nicely printed on the cassette, nothing on the back, but that's fair enough. They're very similar in style. They may well have been exactly like this in the original packaging when the 3 games were released individually. So there's Klax, and finally there's Cyberball. And then in terms of the instruction manuals, each one's got its own. We'll look at Cyberball last. But there's Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters. I'm not going to go through the instructions for this, but you can see that it's the usual sort of instructions. There's nothing especially outstanding. There's various instructions in different languages and things like that. Moving on to Klax, that's more of a flimsy thing. So it's basically just that bit of blue paper with the overview of the game, the controls and all that kind of stuff. Again, reasonably nicely presented. This may well have been in the original packaging for the 3 original releases as well. And then we get to Cyberball, which I think is worth a bit of a closer look. The official Cyberball playbook. So it goes into lots of detail about this game, and it's got the instructions in various languages, but everything's in various languages. So you've got the first sort of introductory bit that tells you about the controls and stuff like that, but then as you go through the book, you've got all the different plays that you can do in the game, and somewhere in here, if I can find it, is a sort of overview of the history of Cyberball. There's some pictures of like the robots that you can control and things like that. I'm just trying to find, let's try and find this by looking at the contents there. Where are we looking for? Key events in the evolution of Cyberball, page 10. Okay, let's try and find that. Hard to do with one hand because it's quite a substantial booklet. Where are we? That's page 12, nearly there. That's the French version of the history. So yeah, it's got this whole backstory for the evolution of Cyberball, which goes through all different things that happened that meant that American football went from being normal, played by humans, to eventually being played by giant robots in the, funnily enough, May of 2022 is mentioned there, and also January of 2022. January 2022, the last human to play the game, Dave Rocket Ralston, makes his final appearance playing wide receiver for Houston. His performance on this day is tragically cut short when he's decapitated by a face masking violation. So yeah, lots of detail gone into that manual, and we'll see whether it was worth it when we look at the game in a moment. So there you go, that's all the instructions and inlay and everything for this compilation. Quite substantial, certainly something that would have stood out if it was on the shelf in the stores, although as I've said, I'm not sure if it ever was because of this thing about the Home Computer Club Special Edition, which we're going to look into more now. I couldn't find any adverts in the magazines of the time for this compilation, but as I've already mentioned, this was something that was offered in the Home Computer Club, and what I have managed to find is Program, the magazine of the Home Computer Club, the holiday edition. I don't know whether that means Christmas or perhaps school holidays. But as you can see, it's got the Tengen Trilogy on the front. Now, if you're not aware of what the Home Computer Club was, it was basically one of these things where you had to buy a game every couple of months. And the way it worked was, usually there'd be some kind of offer in a magazine where you'd get like 3 games for a tenner to sign up for it. And then every couple of months you'd get sent this magazine called Program, and you'd have to pick something from that magazine. And if you didn't, then you got sent by default the main selection, which is what it mentions at the bottom there. And obviously you had to pay for that. If you didn't pay for that, you got into trouble. I'm not exactly sure how they enforced that. I was a member of the Home Computer Club back in the day. So let's have a look at the main selection, which is the Tengen Trilogy. So firstly, what you can see there, it's just the confirmation there that it was released at $19.99. The club price was $13.99 though, and as I've said, most copies I've seen of this on eBay have got that Home Computer Club logo on the front of it, so I'm not sure this was ever actually sold outside of the Home Computer Club. So for that reason, it's possible that everyone paid $13.99 or $17.99 on disc. Now, I think I actually had this when I was a kid because I definitely remember playing Klax and Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters. So it's possible I bought this from the Home Computer Club, but let's just have a little look through this brochure in completion, because why not while we're here. So as you can see, you've got 2 pages on the main selection. That's what you'd get if you didn't pick something else. So you can see it says, this is a fantastic compilation that the Home Computer Club's editor said we had to offer you. If you've been in the coin-op arcades recently, you'll know that Tengen games are some of the most furiously sought after. I'm not too sure about that, to be honest. So as a Home Computer Club member, you can land 3 top Tengen titles in one great value scoop. Buy and play them at home for as long as you like. So then it goes on to talk about Klax, Cyberball and Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters. I'm not going to go through it too much, but you can see they're covered in plenty of detail there. So let's move on and have a look through the rest of this catalogue while we're here, because it is quite interesting to look at, and a nice trip back down memory lane for me, as I was a member of the club, as I mentioned. So let's have a look what else is in there for this particular edition. We've got Vigilante, we've got P-47 Thunderbolt, Crazy Cars 2, and a Gallic Games double, which was Stir Crazy featuring Bobo and Tintin on the Moon. And you can see, generally speaking, you got about 25% off the retail price for these, so you could get a bargain there. We'll move on. This one looks a little bit more dull, perhaps, in as much as it's a golf game, some kind of word processor database thing, just in case you wanted something for your dad or you wanted your parents to buy something, I suppose. And also an interesting Hollywood pack that just features Batman and the Untouchables, which I'm not sure that ever got released at retail either. I think that might have been a Home Computer Club exclusive. So moving on, this was one possible option. You could get the lucky dip, so you could pay $7.99 and get one of these games randomly, or one of these compilations even, because you can see there's a Battle Stations compilation amongst the stuff there, so that might have been a pretty cool thing to go for. I'll carry on moving through. There's a collection for kids for $8.99 that's got a bunch of kids games from Alternative Software. And moving on, now this is one that I know I definitely got from the Home Computer Club, because I remember receiving it and being a little bit disappointed. This is this Arcadia compilation. I think this was released generally at retail as well, but I definitely got it from the Home Computer Club, and I was disappointed because it was supposed to have Operation Thunderbolt in it along with Chase HQ in New Zealand story, but it had Cabal instead. Now actually, in retrospect, the conversion of Cabal was really good, so actually it wasn't a bad thing after all. What was a bad thing was that it had Chase HQ in it, which was dire, but New Zealand story and Cabal were both decent, so that was a pretty good compilation. $16.95 if that's what it cost, quite expensive. In fact, it's possible I got it on disc because I did have a disc drive, so it would have been 20 quid, so I would have had to save up quite a bit of paperboy delivery money to afford that, I suspect. So it's interesting, I may well have had this from this edition of the magazine, or perhaps I had it from a different one. But as I said, I do think I possibly got the Tengen Trilogy from this catalogue. So just to round it off, we've also got Myth, License to Kill, and the Dictionary of Computing, because who would want that? It's a book for 15 quid. Text Adventure, Scapegoat, Strider, and finally on the back page, Italy 1990. The World Cup starts here, which at least puts a sort of time frame on when this was published. It would have been 1990, late 1990 probably, or perhaps 1991. So there we go. That's the Home Computer Club catalogue, which I think was quite an interesting thing to look at. Let's just go back to that page with the Tengen Trilogy, which is what we're focusing on. So let's now take a look at the 3 games on this compilation in more detail, and then give them some ratings at the end of this video. So first, let's take a look at Cyberball. This was released in 1990 based on the 1988 arcade game. Amusingly, this game is set in 2022. Robots 5 times the size of humans, built to withstand the violence and destruction, battle it out in a head-to-head metal-on-metal fight to the finish. Cyberball is a game for 1 or 2 players based loosely on American football. In this futuristic, at the time version of the game, all humans have been eliminated from the game, and you as team captain take control of the robots. You must select offensive and defensive plays, timeouts, passes, laterals, blitzes, and replacements for weak or demolished players. The highlighted play is controlled by the team captain, with the rest of them controlled automatically by the computer based on the play that you choose. As each play progresses, the ball heats up until the critical stage is reached, when the ball explodes, destroying whoever's in possession. During an offensive play, crossing the defuse line resets the ball to cool status. If any player is tackled too often while in possession of the ball, he becomes unreliable and may explode if tackled again. Now, if I did have this compilation background as a kid, I've got absolutely no memory of playing this game whatsoever. I have to say it's a pretty weird concept for a coin-op game, and I'm not sure how it worked on the arcades, but on the home version you play 6 3-minute periods, which means almost 20 minutes of play as a minimum, so it doesn't really seem to me like it would have made much money in the arcades if you're getting 20 minutes of play for 1 credit. I was really hoping this was going to be something more arcade style than a standard American football simulation, but that's pretty much what it is. There's way too many menu screens and choices to make, and you spend more time choosing a play than actually playing the game. The graphics are pretty decent, but the movements of the characters is really slow and unresponsive. The game's also got no sound effects whatsoever. There are a few jingles here and there when you score and things like that, but otherwise it's completely silent as you're playing. The instructions mention several aspects that I don't think made it into the Commodore 64 conversion. You're supposed to be able to give the player in possession a turbo boost as you're running with the ball, but I couldn't get that to work, and also the instructions mention the ball exploding and being able to damage the robots, but none of that seemed to happen when I was playing. This is a game idea that had potential, but unless you're into American football, there's really not much fun to be had, because it's too similar to the game that it's based on. My copy also crashed twice when I was playing, and I couldn't complete a game, and I also couldn't be bothered to load it up again after the second time. I'd always assumed that adding giant robots to a game would make it better, but it looks like this is the exception to that rule. Let's move on to Klax then, a 1990 release based on the coin-op from the same year. The aim of the game is to catch the different coloured tiles as they advance towards you and flip each tile into one of 5 bins. The object is to make coloured stacks of tiles, horizontal, diagonal or rows of 3. These are known as Klaxes. Once a Klax is made, the tiles disappear, causing any tiles on top to drop down and replace them. For bonus points, you can set up the tiles to cause a chain reaction of Klaxes. Your paddle holds a maximum of 5 tiles, and once full, tiles will just drop past it. The drop meter in the centre of the screen shows how many tiles you've failed to catch. Should you drop more tiles than you're allowed, or if all the bins become full at the same time, the game will end. Pushing down on the joystick causes all tiles on the screen to hurtle towards you at a higher speed down the conveyor belt. You can also use the throw option to flip a tile back up the screen in order to pick up a tile of another colour, but you can only throw one tile at a time and it will still come rolling back with all the others. Each level has its own set of criteria for you to meet, such as surviving for a certain number of tiles or getting a set number of Klaxes of a certain type. This is a very good conversion of an above average game, one of the better falling block puzzle game variants, cashing in on the popularity of Tetris. The graphics and sound replicate the arcade game very well, and the gameplay is spot on, although to be honest it's not that hard to replicate any of those aspects. The game does offer a nice variety of challenges, starting easy with just getting a few Klaxes, but moving on to having to get certain types like diagonals or reach a certain points threshold. It does unfortunately get hard really fast, from the level where you have to last long enough for 40 tiles to be dispensed. Given the play area holds 25 and your paddle holds 5, it's surprisingly hard to last 40 as they start to come down the conveyor belt really quickly. The game does have one more go replayability value though, and a fair number of continues, so it's got some lastability as well. The only real niggle I have with it is the joystick control moving left and right can sometimes be a bit imprecise, resulting in lost tiles on higher levels where everything gets a bit more chaotic. Overall though, as I've said, it's a good conversion of a simple but fun game. Rounding out this compilation is Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters, another 1990 release based on the 1989 arcade game. This is a run and gun game for 1 or 2 players in which you as Jake or Duke must rescue Professor Cerebellum and free the enslaved hostages before they're turned into robo-zombies. You must progress through the factories of Planet X, rescuing the hostages and destroying the reptilons that guard them. Around the complex of factories you'll find lockers that contain food, extra energy, more bombs or sometimes special weapons. When destroyed, some of the robots will leave behind green crystals that enhance your ray power. The more crystals you collect, the more devastating your weapon will become. Once you've found the exit from a level, you'll encounter a giant reptilon which can only be destroyed by continuous shooting and bombing. I've always considered this game to be rather like an isometric gauntlet as you make your way through the levels, fighting off hordes of enemies, picking up power-ups and eventually finding the exit. This conversion of the game features lots of sprites on screen, so it's technically very impressive in that respect. The sprites are also quite nice and colourful, but the backgrounds are a little bit disappointing, as while they're detailed they're all in one colour that heavily suggests that they were ported over from the Spectrum. The game's also got quite strange scrolling. You have to push quite close to the edge of the playfield to get it to move, but then the scrolling slowly catches up as you move along. Sound-wise it's pretty decent with a choice of music or sound effects, though not both at the same time. The music's okay but quite repetitive, but the sound effects are pretty good. There's plenty of levels and the simultaneous 2-player options are positive, as I'm sure it's a lot more fun with a counterpart to fight off the hordes of enemies. It's also got plenty of continues, so you can get quite far into the game. After the first few stages you get to choose which level you progress to, and that's a nice touch, but it is missing the between stage spaceship level and some of the controls from the arcade version, as well as some of the enemies and environmental features. The biggest problem with the game is it's very samey and gets boring quite quickly. It's just a matter of fighting off legions of respawning robots before finding the exit to the stage. That sameness extends to the end level bosses too, as it just seems to be the same big robot you're fighting over and over again. As you know, I'm not a big fan of isometric games generally, but to be honest it's not really a problem here, although you do get stuck in the scenery occasionally. The game also has some bugs and glitches, such as your bombs going off randomly after the first few levels. The game's certainly playable and offered a reasonable amount of fun for the money, but ultimately it's an average conversion of an average game. Couldn't find any reviews of this compilation in the magazines of the time, and as I've said, I suspect it may not have even been released at retail and only by the Home Computer Club. So let's move on to the ratings. So firstly let's give some scores to the games individually, and Cyberball, well, I'm not a fan of American football games generally, and adding giant robots to it didn't really bring anything new to the game, and when you add in the fact that the game seems to crash quite frequently too, I'm just going to give this a score of 4 out of 10. Klax is undoubtedly the best game on this compilation, the Commodore 64 conversion is excellent, and the game itself is playable and addictive, so I'm giving that 8 out of 10. And finally, Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters. It's a pretty average conversion, missing several features from the arcade game, and while it is playable for a little while, it soon gets boring. I'm giving that 6 out of 10. Moving on to the overall rating for this compilation then, and the packaging I thought was pretty decent, certainly very unique. The case it comes in is a bit flimsy and prone to breaking, but the fact that each game is on its own tape with its own set of instructions and the inserts are vibrant and attractive means overall it's a well presented compilation. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 for packaging. The game scores average out at 6 out of 10, and as for the value for money, well, it's quite an expensive compilation if it costs $19.99 for 3 games. There's only really one game out of the 3 that's worth spending much time on, and although all 3 games had only recently been released, it wouldn't be too long before they'd be released at budget price, so I have to give this a value for money rating of just 4 out of 10. If you were able to get this from the Home Computer Club for $13.99 back in the day, then perhaps I would have pushed that score up to 5 out of 10. So when we put those ratings together and come out with a final score for this compilation, it's 60%. So to round things off for this edition, let's see where the Tengen Trilogy features in my league table, and as you can see it's gone in at 3rd place, one of 3 compilations that's got a score of 60%. I've decided to put this above the other 2 because despite the value for money rating being lower than the others, the average score for the games is higher. Even so, it's not really a compilation I could recommend. So that rounds off my review of the Tengen Trilogy. If you've got any thoughts on this compilation or the games contained within it, then please let me know in the video comments. I hope to be back with another compilation review in the near future, and until then, thanks very much for watching and come back soon for another retro gaming video.